بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. So inshallah in today's class we're only going to cover the next line of the poem, which is the second line of the poem. But in this line of poetry, we are going to accomplish a few things. Number one is we are going to talk about the definition of a prophet or a messenger, the Nabi and the Rasul, and then we'll also mention Ulul Azm, those of great resolve, which are the three categories of prophets with a capital P. So we're going to define those. So as we go along, what we want, because this is a class in theology, obviously, we want to make sure that we are defining these terms. And then after that, what we will do is we are going to talk about whom the Prophet, in this case Sayyidina Muhammad, whom he was sent to. And then in that we will talk about what the definition of humans are and what the definitions of the jinn are. And then we will also mention what is the prophecy of the Prophet towards the angels, because there is language in our tradition about that. And how do we reconcile that with the angels being infallible? And then following that, we will talk about the science of Tawheed itself, and we will do the mabadi', the 10 mabadi', the 10 introductory, the mabadi' al-ashra, the 10 introductory remarks or the 10 introductory fields that need to be defined, as is the tradition of engaging in any science. If you've taken the Usul al-Fiqh class with me, then you will know that we did that for the Usul al-Fiqh class. I don't believe I did that for the fiqh class, for the furu'a, because I think that's a little bit more understood. But subjects like this that are a little bit more narrow from the point of view of the issues that are discussed, I like to introduce it so we kind of have a framework in our minds. So we'll take those 10. And then following that, we will conclude by what the definition of religion, ad-deen, is itself in the Islamic understanding. So even though it's one line of poetry, mashallah, we're going to have all of these issues that we're going to unpack. And then I think as the lectures progress, we'll cover obviously more lines of poetry, because we have to get to the end of the ilahiyat section, inshallah. So I'll see you soon. I'll see you in the next clip. All right, so let us turn to our text, and we will say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. Our author Imam al-Laqani, he says, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him and may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and the next. على نبي جاء بالتوحيد وقد عرى الدين عن التوحيد. Upon a prophet who came with belief in oneness when religion was bereft of belief in oneness. Okay, that is the line that we're going to discuss. But as I said in the introductory clip, there are quite a few things that we need to hash out here. So let me just get my hashia in front of me. Like I like to refer to it as the big guns. Okay, so the first thing that we want to take notice of is in the poem he said ala nabiyyin, upon a prophet. So it's important for us to understand what our definition of prophecy is, because as we said in yesterday's lecture, in the previous lecture, that one of the main areas that Islamic theology discusses is what we call an-nubuwwat, things that are related to the prophets, plural. So what is a prophet, therefore, in Islam? The category is a prophet, a nabi, and then a more narrower subset of that is a rasul, or a messenger, and a narrower subset of that is ulul azm, or those of great resolve, alayhim salam jami'an. A nabi is a free man, this is the standard Sunni definition, a free man who is without any type of physical ailment or disease that would repel people, who has been given revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm going to just see quickly in the translation if there's an actual definition. So he says, Imam al-Bayjuri says, a Nabi, a prophet, is defined as a human being who is male, free from amongst the offspring of Adam, free from any repulsive features, inspired with a sacred law, which he practices even if he was not commanded to convey it. Okay, it's a more elegant translation than mine. So, obviously it has to be a human being, meaning the progeny of Adam and Eve, alayhim salam. And then the dominant position is that he's male. I'll get to that. There's a dissenting position held by Ibn Hazm that they could be females. I'll get to that in a second, but let's just go with this dominant position. So it's a human being, so not from the jinn, a male, not a woman, free, so it can't be somebody who's enslaved, and free from any ailment or disease that would repulse people. I'm going like that with my hands to if somebody had some kind of physical feature that people would be, I don't want to be with that person, that would be antithetical to the definition of prophecy. Because the Prophet, alayhi salam, is supposed to attract people, supposed to be handsome, well put together, strong, etc. And is given wahy, is given revelation, even if they are not asked to go out and preach that message. So there can be, I don't know the right word for it, but there could be like a private prophet, okay, a prophet who has been given revelation for themselves. They are from the Anbiya, but they have not been commanded to go out and do tabligh of the Risalah. They haven't been ordered or commanded by Allah Ta'ala to go out and preach that message. Now, somebody might say, well, we have the story of Job, Ayub alayhi salam, and he had all of these ailments, and the response to that is, well, those ailments were not natural. They were given to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a test. In other words, that wasn't his natural default position, but that was his particular test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, as far as the male thing is concerned, Ibn Hazm from the Zahiri madhab has a very convincing argument that there were women amongst the Anbiya, and he would include people like Asya, the wife of Pharaoh, the wife of Musa alayhi salam, the mother of Christ, Mary alayhi salam, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى أُمِّ مُوسَى, and we gave revelation to the mother of Moses. Now, of course, there's the debate. It's a minor position because the other ulama will say, well, that's like Allah saying He gave wahi to the bees. That Allah gave wahi to the nahl to do what they do. So there are two kinds of revelation. There's the revelation of prophecy, and then there's like the natural revelation or inspiration that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives. Now, of course, Ibn Hazm responds to that, and he mentions how all of those females that he holds were prophets are mentioned amongst the list of prophets themselves, the male prophets. And to be quite fair, Ibn Hazm's argument is very convincing because he has strong dalil, but it remains a minority position. It's also a position that has no consequence now because there are no prophets after Sayyidina Muhammad. We're talking about the past. But it is important that you know that this is a difference of opinion. And this is not like some obscure difference of opinion. It's even in Bayjuri's Hashia himself, he writes about Ibn Hazm's dissenting position. Okay, now a Rasul is one step, or is a more narrower subset of the Prophet, that they have been given not only a message, but they have been given a sharia. They have been given a system of law, a way. And therefore, every Rasul, every messenger has to be a prophet, but not every prophet is a messenger. And then the messenger, therefore, has to do tabligh, has to go out and do the tabligh. And then a even more refined subset of that are the ulul azm, or those of great resolves, which are the great anbiya like Nuh alayhi salam, Ibrahim alayhi salam, etc. And of course, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now, our literature has differences of opinion about how many of the prophets there were. The standard number of the prophets is that there were 124,000. Another opinion says that there were 224,000. And then of the Rusul, of the messengers, the dominant opinion is that there were 313. The important thing to know is that the actual number of prophets, let's go with the lowest common, that's a bad way of phrasing it, we have to have respect for the Anbiya. Let's go with the widest definition of those Anbiya, which is prophecy, because it's the definition that encompasses the other two. The number of prophets that have been sent to humanity by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala far out is larger, much larger and greater than the names that we have in our sources. So we only have the names of a few of them. And the important thing for us to remember is that many, many more were sent than what we know about. And therefore, this reinforces a couple of important beliefs, is that there are many other faith traditions that are pre-Islamic in the world around us that most likely where came from actual prophecy. So we withhold judgment about those people, whether it be somebody like the Buddha or Confucius or these type of Eastern traditions that are clearly a religion, clearly come from some sort of niche of prophecy, to use our language. But those names are not necessarily listed for us in our sources, so we withhold judgment. And if they were prophets, we believe in them and we say alayhim as-salam, and we have no problem with accepting that. And then the second sort of teaching from that is that it widens for us the concept of Ahlul Kitab, the people of the book. Anybody that has or is claimed or heir to some kind of religious tradition, we call them the people of the book, even if that book is not mentioned in the Quran. And this is the sunnah of the Salaf. This is how they dealt with people as Islam spreads, particularly to the East, and they encountered these, what are referred to as the Dharmic faiths. They dealt with them as we deal with the people of the book. So we have a category for that, and that squares away with our belief that the Anbiya were so many and so great, much, much more than what our tradition or our sources tell us. Okay, so that's a little bit about prophets, messengers, and those of great resolve. And of course, the next thing for us to discuss is whom these prophets are sent to and who is their address to, and we will pick that up inshallah in the next clip. So in the case of prophets and messengers and those of great resolve whom have been ordered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do tabligh of their message, whom are they sent to? We also believe that all of the prophets were sent to their specific people, with the exception of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who was sent to all of mankind. And that's an important teaching because sometimes we forget that teaching. So the prophets are sent to the people of their time. The exception is that Sayyidina Muhammad was sent not to all people, but what we call al-thaqalain, was sent to the two heavy things. And it's either, it is a reference to humankind and jinn kind, and the thiqal or the weighty thing can either come from the sins of us, of mankind and the jinn kind, or can come from the fact that we occupy the earth and we live and we walk and so on. There are different sort of etymology for that. But that is how we refer to the ins and the jinn, the humankind and the jinn kind, the thiqalain. And so therefore the Prophet ﷺ was also sent to the jinn. And that's important for us to remember that the jinn, like the human beings, are creatures that have been created with taklif, with moral responsibility. And therefore amongst the jinn are believers and disbelievers. Amongst the jinn are Muslims, the way we are Muslims and follow the Sharia of Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ, and amongst them are not, that are the patrons of Satan, shayateen al-insi wal-jinn, the Satans or the patrons of Satan or the friends of Satan that are from the people, humankind and jinn kind. So the word jinn, I don't want people to think that it automatically means something bad, that there are believers. Now, when it comes to jinn, of course, Muslims have all sorts of stories when it comes to jinn and whatnot, and most of those stories are false. And the upshot is the likelihood that you will interact with a jinn in your life is so minuscule that it's almost non-existent. And these things are extremely, 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 extremely rare, and therefore nothing to worry about. But it is important for us to remember that it is also part of our belief that they have taklif, moral responsibility. They have reason, even though the ulama teach us that the reason of the jinn is less than the reason of a human being. So we are superior from the point of view of the rational and intellectual capacity. But there are also believers amongst the jinn, and the Prophet ﷺ was sent to them. قُلْ أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ أَنَّهُ اسْتَمَعَ نَفْرٌ مِنَ الْجِنِّ. The chapter of the jinn in the Quran. Now, as far as it comes to the Prophet ﷺ, here being Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ, being sent to the angels, now one of the issues with that needs to be reconciled is that the angels, we believe, are infallible. Now the jinn, their substance matter is fire. The substance matter of human beings is clay. The substance matter of the angels is light. And because their substance matter is light, we say it's jismun khafif. It's a very thin and light, almost transparent substance, the angels. And it doesn't have the heaviness, the thiqal that the human being and the jinn have, which is also one of the, I mentioned previously, the etymology of the thiqalain, that's also one of them, is that our body is kathif, our body is thick and has matter and substance to it. The angels are very light. We might even want to use the word ephemeral in the English language for that. Not exactly, but kind of hints to that type of light substance. What's important is that part of our belief in the angels is that they're infallible. لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون. Allah says in the Quran, they do not disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with what has been commanded to them, and they execute and carry out His orders, Jalla wa ala. So the angels have no free will. They're always in a state of belief and worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, why would a prophet be sent to them? So when we talk about Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ being sent to the angels, it is for tashrif, it is to honor the angels because of the greatness of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Of course, when we get to the nubuwwat, we will talk about our belief in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but it's important, we can summarize it in just one sort of sentiment. We can say that it is consensus amongst all of the Muslims that there is nothing greater in the created universe, whether it is the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, paradise itself, the tablet, the pen, the angels, the Kaaba, Mecca, nothing in the created universe is greater than Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And that is a huge statement, and it's a very, a cornerstone of our belief as Sunni Muslims. So when the Prophet ﷺ, we say, was sent also to the angels, it is a way to honor the angels because we are therefore attributing the greatest thing in creation to the angels. Okay. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, we believe, was commissioned when he was 40 lunar years. That also presents a slight problem that needs to be reconciled. When I say problem, this is the way of the ulama. It's not a problem like with a capital P. It means that there is an apparent contradiction. When we studied usul al-fiqh, we talked about how to reconcile apparent contradictions. The Prophet ﷺ was born in Rabi al-Awwal, but he received the revelation in the month of Ramadan, the night of power, Laylatul Qadr, with the revelation Iqra in Ramadan. And we know that Ramadan is after Rabi al-Awwal by 6 months. So was the Prophet ﷺ 40 and a half years old, lunar years old? No, we say he was 40 because starting when he turned 40 in Rabi al-Awwal and then the subsequent months leading up to Ramadan, he had what we call al-irhasat. He had those dreams in which our ulama teach us that everything that is going to happen today, he had seen it in the dream previously. Not like one or two things, but every night he slept and he woke up and he was reliving everything that he already saw in his dream. And we know that the honest, truthful dream and vision is one of the signs of prophecies. We also believe that most of the prophets were commissioned when they were 40 years old, but not necessarily all, because we know that Christ alayhi salam received revelation and was risen when he was young. I mean, he spoke when he was in the cradle. So it's not something that is sort of a absolute teaching, but a partial teaching. Not partial, but يعني تقريبا. In general, the prophets were sent and commissioned when they were 40. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Okay. Now I want to do with you the 10 principles of the craft, or al-mabadi' al-ashra. I think that's the next thing that we need to discuss. Okay. إن مبادئ كل فن 10 الحد والموضوع ثم الثمرة وفضله ونسبه والواضع والاسم والاستمداد وحكم الشارع مسائل وبعض بالبعض اكتفى ومن درى الجميع حاز الشرف. So verily the principles of every craft are 10, and there are different, I think in the Usul al-Fiqh I used a different poem, but there are different formulas, but they're the same 10. For every principle or every subject there are 10. The definition, the subject matter followed by its fruit, its virtue, its relation to other sciences and its founder, its name, its proof, and its legal ruling, and its main topics. Some were content with knowing only some, while the one who encompasses all has attained nobility. Meaning that in some circles, some of the ulama will only define a few of these 10. But if you do all 10, then you have a more complete understanding, which is what we're going to do. I mean, we're not going to exhaust it. I'm not going to, keep going on and on and on. But this is a very, very important pedagogical tool that the ulama of Islam use to introduce a subject matter. Because if you have a subject matter that becomes well defined, you know what you're doing, you also know what you're not doing. You know what you're talking about, you also know what you're not talking about. You know how you arrived at the answers, you also know how you did not arrive at the answers. So for me personally, when I studied this way, it's not only helpful to know what it is, but it's also equally important and sometimes more important to know what it is not. And the Arabs, they say, بِضِدِّهَا تُعْرَفُ الْأَشْيَاء, by its opposites things are known. Okay, so we'll just go down the list that Imam al-Bayjuri provides. So starting with al-had, or the definition. And I'm going to read from the translation. The definition, the had, is, as we have mentioned earlier, the singular worship of the one worshipped with true conviction and complete belief in his oneness and the perfection of his essence, attributes, and actions. And I see that I'm out of time. I'll pick it up in the next clip, inshallah. Okay, so let me just start by number one again, the definition. So what is the definition of Tawheed or theology? It is the singular worship of the one worshipped, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with true conviction and complete belief in his oneness and the perfection of his essence, attributes, and actions. So true conviction alludes to the fact that we have to have a level of certainty in our belief, which is why this science is so important, because it helps us understand and arrive at a level of certainty in worshiping God. The subject matter, the mawdu', is the study of the essence of Allah and encompasses that which is necessary, wajib, impossible, mustahil, and permissible, jaiz, regarding Allah, known as ilahiyat. So when we talk about the ilahiyat or things of God, we will learn the things that are obligatory for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and possible. Secondly, it is the study of the essences of the messengers, plural, all of them, not just Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, including what is wajib, mustahil, and jaiz. Same thing, what is obligatory in our belief of them, what is impossible in our belief of them, and what is possible. This is known as an-nubuwat. And then thirdly, it includes what has been transmitted regarding eschatology and the unseen, sam'iyat, things that we hear, meaning we hear from the Quran, we hear from the Sunnah. These are the signs of the end of time, and this is what happens life after death. So we call them sam'iyat, meaning that which is necessary to believe as reported in the Quran and Sunnah without rational proof. So we have no rational proof that this is how the end of time is going to happen. But if you look at ashrat as-sa'ah, the signs of the end of time, all of the minor signs happen during the life of the Prophet ﷺ. All of the medium signs have already happened up until our lifetime. Now we are recording in the year 1445 of the Hijrah. And some of the beginnings of the major signs have already happened. So it's all true from the point of view that, okay, we don't have any rational proof, But when you look back in history, all of those things have happened, so obviously it's true. Okay, number 3, it's thamara. What's the fruit of studying the science? The fruit is the honor of having knowledge of Allah as well as everlasting bliss. Well, because if you have the right knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and belief in Allah, that belief inshallah will vouch for us yawm al-qiyamah, ya Rabb, inshallah. Its virtue, what is the fadl of this science? Its fadl lies in it being the most noble of sciences, as it deals with the essence of Allah and the essence of the messengers. This is a noble subject because of its direction and connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's very common when we talk about its virtue. We don't study sciences that are not virtuous, obviously. When we talk about the Sharia sciences, all the sciences are virtuous because it's a way of us either believing in God or following what God wants us to do. Nisbah. What is the relationship of ilm al-kalam or theology to the other sciences? Is that it is the foundation of all the religious sciences, while the other sciences are its branches. That's why it's called ilm usul al-din. In Al-Azhar, we call it ilm usul al-din, the science of the foundation or the principle of religion itself, because obviously our entire edifice of Islam is built on what we believe, so it's the foundational thing. Who is its founder? The Wadi'. In the world of Sunni Islam, it's Abu Hassan al-Ash'ari, followed by Abu Mansur al-Maturidi. I want to give you the death dates of those two, radiyallahu anhum. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, he died in Baghdad in 324 of the Hijrah, and Abu Mansur al-Maturidi, he died in the year 333. So they were contemporaries, but Abu Musa passed away earlier. So the founder is Abu Musa al-Ash'ari as well as Abu Mansur al-Maturidi. And all of those who followed them, they documented the entire creed, systematized it, and refuted the Mu'tazila. All the prophets came with the same message of Tawheed, while these honorable scholars documented and compiled its details. So just like we refer to our madhab as the Shafi'i madhab, because Imam Shafi'i organized the fiqh, organized his usul, so therefore we refer to it as the Shafi'i madhab. It doesn't mean that Imam Shafi'i invented fiqh. Imam Shafi'i took from Malik and took from the Hanafis and took from Awza'i and Layth, etc. And all of them have their asanid, as we talked about in our course, Introduction to the Shafi'i School. All of them have their own asanid back to the Sahaba, back to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So if you find our asanid in ilm al-kalam, you're going to find the same thing. So the eponym of the madhab of Sunni Aqidah is Abu Musa al-Ash'ari and Abu Mansur al-Maturidi, because they codified and documented and wrote down and systematized this body of knowledge, but they didn't invent it. They just simply articulated and re-articulated what was found at the times of the Salaf. And I repeat that because for whatever reason, it's a common misconception that people have. Okay, what is the name of the science? And I alluded to this, I think, in my previous lecture, the introductory lecture. It has many names. It's one of those things that has many names. So its name is the science of Tawheed, and it is the most well-known subject since it discusses the oneness of Allah. It is also known as Ilm al-Kalam, since there have been major debates regarding the attributes of Allah. So we can call it Tawheed, we can call it Aqidah, we can call it Ilm al-Kalam, we can call it Usul al-Din, Ilm al-Tawheed, etc. Those are some of the famous or popular names of it. So don't be tripped up by the names. If you walked into a bookstore, an Islamic bookstore, and the books are categorized by their subject matter, you might find these alternate names, Usul al-Din or Aqidah or Tawheed, etc. They're all interchangeable, but they all deal with the three things, the ilahiyat, nubuwat, and samayat. Okay, it's istimdad, it's proof. Where do we take our knowledge of this from? We take them both from the transmitted sciences, al-naqliyat, and from the rational sciences, al-aqliyat. And that's an important hallmark of Sunni Aqidah, because in the beginning of the Aqidah, we are obsessed with these three rational categories of what is rationally necessary, rationally impossible, rationally possible. If you don't understand that, which we'll get to in a couple of lectures, you're not going to understand Sunni Kalam, because it's going to be too abstract. But that's a cornerstone. So there is a rational component to that. Number 9, what is its legal ruling? Its legal ruling is that it is a personal obligation, fardu ayn, upon every male and female who is of age, unrationally or morally responsible, mukallaf. It's fardu ayn, meaning that each Muslim has to have a basic amount of belief, of aqidah, enough to give them certainty in their worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They don't have to be, you don't have to like read all of Taftazani or Al-Iji or something like that, the multi-volume works of Kalam or Al-Razi or Al-Ghazali or whatever to be considered. That's not what he means by individually obligatory. This book that we're studying would be, from that perspective, even more advanced than what is obligatory. What is obligatory is just, God is one and he has these attributes, the Prophet ﷺ is the final prophet. It's like basic things that you would teach a child, right? Enough that they have certainty that this is what they believe, because you can't base your belief on something that is questionable or that you're shaky about. Number 10, its main topics are that which is necessary, possible, and impossible for Allah and His Messenger. Okay, so these are the 10 introductory things. And then finally, what I would like to turn to is what is the definition of religion. I'm just looking in the book so I can read you the definition. The longer definition of religion or deen is that which has been divinely established, steering the possessor of sound intellect through a praiseworthy choice to that which is inherently good. And I just love that definition. I mean, it's just so beautiful that we actually have a definition of what a religion is. It is that which has been divinely established, steering the possessor of sound intellect through praiseworthy choice to that which is eternally good. And the reason this is important for us is it also helps us understand, and I want to come back to this, about what is Ahlul Kitab, what are the people of the book. If there is an organized pre-Islamic religion that seeks to do this, to show its people how to lead the good life, and it's organized in some way, that is what a deen is. And therefore, as Muslims, we would refer to those people or that book, quote unquote, as the kitab. Even if they don't say, well, I remember when I was in Japan, the Japanese don't like the word religion, the English word religion. They say, we don't have a religion. And I said, okay, I respect that, but from our perspective, just as a Westerner, as a Judeo-Islamic or Judeo-Christian Islamic perspective, it's a religion. It's not an insult. It's actually something praiseworthy. So having that definition, I think, is important. And with that, we come to a close, and we'll say, Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So alhamdulillah, in today's class we only took the second line of the poem, but hopefully we can see now why it was important to dedicate a whole lecture to it. So the first thing that we did is we were able to understand what is the definition of a prophet, a messenger, and those of great resolve, ulul azm. And we understand that the common definition that unites all of them is the prophet being a free non-slave, a free man who is healthy and been given revelation, even if they are not asked or commanded by Allah Ta'ala to preach it. Following that, we talked a little bit about the numbers of prophets and the numbers of Rusul, alayhim as-salam. And then following that, we talked about whom the prophet is sent to. In our case, or in the case of all of the prophets, they were sent to their people specifically, except to Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He was sent to all of mankind and to jinn kind. So we talked a little bit about what the human being is and what the jinn kind are. We learned that the jinn, there are believers amongst them and non-believers, and we learned that they are also rational, like the human being, but of a less rational capacity than the human beings. Then we talked about the prophet being sent to the angels as a way to honor the angels. Following that, we did the Mabadi al-Ashra, which are the 10 introductory concepts that need to be defined, that introduces a Sharia science, and we went through that as per the little poem that we had. And we learned, I think one of the highlights of that is for us to remember that a minimum amount of aqidah is individually obligatory, fardu ayn, upon each Muslim, so that we arrive at a level of certainty in our worship, because we cannot worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if we have doubts. We cannot worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fully if we are questioning our faith. So the purpose of ilm al-kalam or al-aqidah or tawheed, another thing we learned is has multiple names, is that it helps us arrive at that certainty that is needed for us to carry out our life, and then our religious life. And then lastly, we ended by talking about the definition of religion and how that definition ultimately is to help encourage mankind to make the right choice to lead a good life. And therefore, that helps us also understand as Muslims how we would look at other pre-Islamic faiths, traditions, and refer to them also as Ahl al-Kitab. والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.